they have talked about Hitler, and some of them thought he was a ding-ding.
Well,
He
we
should have been
didn't
a
know a
private
whole lot
citizen.
about it. It just didn't seem like we knew very much about him, or at least they didn't talk about him that much around the kids until late in the war, or when the war was close to being over, and then when they started talking about the things that he had done, then he was horrible. They wanted him disposed of. Mostly, the only time we got any real information was if you went to a movie in theater. They had what they called movie tone news, and they had like what we see on TV now about the wars that are going on. They'd have that kind of stuff, but it was very, very edited. They didn't tell much. Happened over there ahead of our time, you know. So it was on Monday when the president was on radio saying that, telling about Pearl Harbor being bombed and that we would now be in the war, that they'd been talking about the war, so now we were in it, definitely, because them bombing one of our, of course, Hawaii wasn't a state yet then, so it wasn't, it was a territory, but it was still one of the United States' territories.
I know there was a lot of people killed.
Yeah, and that was just the beginning of
That don't kill me, can only make me stronger. I need you to hurry up now, cause I can't wait much longer. I know I got to be right now, cause I can't get much stronger. Man, I've been waiting all night now. That's how
the thing that I was most aware of was the fact that just about everything you wanted was rationed.
Yeah. He had stamps to buy, or a letter to buy gas, and he had to get stamps for groceries, and you know, they call it relief then. It's like what do they call it now?
More like unemployment, or the same kind of thing as unemployment and stuff now, but everything was rationed. You had to have like for tires for your car and for gas, and you'd have to have tokens and pages of stamps for so much, to buy so much. Meat was rationed, sugar was rationed, butter was rationed. Mom would send me to the store and she'd say, "Now don't you lose those tokens, because you can't get what I need if you don't have those tokens." Whatever it was she was sending me after. They were just little red or blue, about the size of a dime. So they were very easy to lose, and they were I don't think they were paper, they were, I'm not real sure. They were like plastic, but it wasn't, I don't think it was plastic back then. Anyway, you had them in your hand and you knew you had to get to the store with them in your hand, whether you had money or not, because at the grocery store, which was only half a block away from us, we had a bill run from one payday to the next. Dad would go in and pay the bill, and then we'd be ready for the next week. But you could get them without the money, but you couldn't get them without the tokens. If you didn't have enough meat stamps, you couldn't get the meat you wanted. If you didn't have enough sugar stamps, you couldn't get it. You couldn't get the sugar that you needed. Say, don't hoard your stamps. Don't hoard your stamps. Well, if you didn't, you couldn't get the sugar, the amount, enough sugar at the time you wanted to, the time that the stuff was ready to be canned.
Most of the people back then raised their own gardens and their own
Oh
fruit.
yeah, you had your own gardens and fruit and
potatoes.
everything.
I think we had, well, I'd say pretty close to 2 acres of garden that we raised, and us boys took care of it.
We had hand-me-downs. Leather was another thing that was rationed because they used all the most of the available leather, new leather, to make boots and stuff for the soldiers. So I know that during the summer, us kids mostly went barefoot. And just before school was ready to start, my dad insisted that we be home so that he could fit us all with shoes to start school with. And they were all hand-me-downs from somebody else in the family, cousins.
I let it fall, my heart, and as it fell, you rose to claim it. It was dark, and I was over, until you kissed my lips, and you saved me. My hands, they were strong, but my knees were far too weak.
We really didn't hear much about that until the war was over. After the war was over, then they started talking about it, or when it was just about over, and it was horrifying to us, and a lot of people just didn't believe it. It wasn't very long after the landings that we started hearing about it. But I don't think we really knew the full impact of it until after it had been over for a while. We didn't know how many people, we knew they had landed and were fighting the Germans, and it looked like we were going to win, but we didn't have any idea how many people got killed until a long time afterwards. It was celebrating because they thought it was going to end the war. And then, of course, they dropped another nuclear bomb right away after that to make sure, and that seemed like a little more overkill to most people.